Sheltered from the kitschy boutiques and quaint inns geared for tourists in New Hope, Pennsylvania, lies the elegantly landscaped compound of George Nakashima, America's preeminent woodworker, whose life and work embodied a simplicity and spirituality reflective of his ancestral Japanese homeland. It is here that his daughter Mira Nakashima Yarnell carries forth her father's vision while discovering and nurturing her own distinctive artistry. Nakashima is considered a pioneer in the movement to rediscover the values of expressiveness and individual craftsmanship in woodworking. And for over 20 years, Mira worked side by side with him, learning to let the form of each one-of-a-kind piece emerge naturally from the qualities of grain and texture in the unfinished wood. Nakashima died in 1990, and these days the family business is managed by Mira in partnership with her mother and brother. But beyond bottom-line concerns, Mira must balance the continuance of her father's legacy and the development of her own career. In 1992, she was asked to create a memorial to her father, a reading room in the James A. Michener Art Museum in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Secluded from the other galleries, a respite where visitors might pause to contemplate. Through this project, she has emerged as the fully realized architect and designer whose loving care and attention to the building of the room has resulted in a sanctuary described as the jewel of the museum.
What I've done is created a room that we've initially started to call a reading room. And once we started to think of a reading room, we started to think of quiet contemplation. And the subject of the Nakashima tradition was brought up. It occurred to us that this entire room, not only furniture, could be part of an effort that we might do together.
And it was clear to me that it was more a holistic approach that was needed in the Michener Art Museum, where we would certainly coordinate with Mira, but I would much prefer that the detail be a reflection of her philosophy, the Japanese culture, and to try to aspire to have the tranquility which we experienced while visiting the compound on Aquitong Road. Upon visiting the property in New Hope and seeing the different buildings that were created over a number of years by the Nakashima family, we started to gain a sense of the traditions of Japanese architecture, and with Mira, greater insight into which materials belonged and which ones didn't belong. And there is such a tranquility about visiting those buildings that I started to see various elements as opportunities, and Mira would point out some of the favorite details or aspects of various buildings that she thought might contribute to this ultimate result.
To me, when I first said I would do it, it was just another step in doing what I do. You know, I've done other architecture before, and I was happy to do something that was in tribute to my father and to his work and to his architecture. But to have it become, you know, a jumping-off point for my own career, I didn't even think of. I mean, if that happened, that was a happy byproduct. But when I first agreed to do it, I just thought of it as another project that I would enjoy doing and that I would like to make as beautiful as possible. There were, I mean, although it was an empty envelope, so to speak, there were quite a few givens. The dimensions of the room were already given, and the height of the windows and the configuration of the windows was already there. There was a door, and there was, I think there was even a compartment for the proposed video equipment to sit in, and Lynn and his architects had proposed a window bench around the edge, and I think that's because they had already seen the soul of a tree and thought that that was a good idea. So I started from there and improvised a little bit, and thought about the wall covering, and I liked the wall covering in the tea room and in a lot of the Kyoto tea rooms. So I thought if we could get that, that would be really nice to do. The wall material was called kyokabe, and it was traditionally used in Kyoto for tea rooms and traditional Japanese architecture from way back. It's not used very commonly today, but it is available, and we were able to procure some through our associates in Japan for this project. The shoji screens are also a very common element in Japanese architecture, and each of them is proportioned differently according to the window size. There is a traditional proportion which we followed fairly closely, but it's Japanese architects nowadays don't pay much attention to it because they use these huge sheets of shoji paper. In the old days they had little rolls that were 11 inches wide, and you had to proportion the slats accordingly. But it's no longer necessary. Finding the actual materials for that was difficult. We happened to track down some Port Orford cedar for the shoji screens, which my father used most of the time when he could get it for the shoji. Here it's very dense and very hard and very aromatic, and it's a beautiful wood, and that's what we used for the shoji screens. The planks we used for the Michener room were once destined to be a dining table for Andy Warhol, and we were just about ready to put it into production when Andy Warhol died, so we still had the wood left, and now it's in the George Nakashima Memorial Reading Room. That is American elm, and it was a huge tree. The planks we have were 12 feet long by over 4 feet wide. The wood we used for the coffee table in the center of the reading room was from a Clara walnut burl from California, and it was one of those exceptional burls in which the wood is curly all the way through. Usually you get it on the outside here and there, but it doesn't go all the way through to the center and back again. And I think we had 3 or 4 slabs from that exceptional burl, and we used them all, and there was 1 slab left, and having realized that they were all gone except this one really beautiful slab, Dad had written "not for sale" on it, and when we were asked to do a memorial room and memorial furniture, really, for my father, it seemed the most appropriate thing to use this wonderful piece of wood that was not for sale as a memorial to my father, and I designed a special base to go with it that's different than we've done before. The so-called mother post in the reading room is a functional structural element. It was designed as a steel post, I think, by the architect and engineer at one point, and I was studying the drawing and trying to figure out how to work around this post, which is sort of off one corner of the reading room, and asked Lynn if we could change that to a wooden post, and he was kind enough to send out his consulting engineer to check with me and make sure that the dimensions of that wood was big enough to hold up the corner of the room, and it met his approval. But it was a natural post. It came from the Nakashima property and was, as you can see, very free form and irregular, and we had to do a lot of hand work on it. The bark had to be cleaned out of all the little pockets, and all these little branches had to be trimmed off and sanded, and the cracks had to be filled. And it was a lot of hand work. I don't know if it's carved exactly, but it certainly has a lot of hand work. I think it took almost a week just to clean up the outside edges of that post, and then some to fit it in there. I think the most gratifying thing was to have it all come together at the end. It was kind of exciting seeing, when I came back from Japan, I was in Japan earlier this year when they were doing the plastering. And when I first came back, I looked at the plaster walls and I looked at the color scheme for the rest of the Michener Museum, and I thought, I don't know if this is going to work or not because it's so different. And then as the different elements came together and they finally put the Shoji Screens in and they got the grill work up, and then it was looking a little better. And then when they put the furniture in, it just kind of all came together, and I thought that was what was great, that it actually worked at the end. You know, I had my doubts several times along the way.
Respect the wood as it has swelled with every drop of rain that fell, and it has shrunk again with every sun that rises. In the building of its rings, it tells of joy and suffering. It marks a prophecy for man and writes the history of the land. Respect the eye that chose this tree beneath the forest canopy. It was the last eye to see it in its glory. It knew the tale it would tell, but could not speak until it fell. It chose this story for ourselves, like a good book off the shelf. The story of life's seasons is the ballad that it sings. Our lives are marked and bound together by concentric rings. Respect the arm and simple strength that subdued its mighty length, that embraced the wood with metal, bone, and muscle. More than life came crashing down as one more giant hit the ground and was carted to the mill. Somewhere the stump will mourn it still. The story of life's seasons is the ballad that it sings. Our lives are marked and bound together by concentric rings. Respect the labor and the toil of those who took this fruit of soil and sliced it into slabs and planks and lumber. Those that stacked it in the yard and those who shipped it wide and far, did they know where it would land as they held it in their hand? The story of life's seasons is the ballad that it sings. Our lives are marked and bound together by concentric rings.
It's one of the most spectacular joys of doing this, and that joy is the chance to give an artist like Mira the opportunity to flower and to take upon herself a project like this. And as I look back on any of these kinds of projects, it's the people that you have an opportunity to work with, and to have Mira suddenly take charge and be responsible for the overall concept, and this, this act of love on her part as she is honoring her father, and at the same time, it is her design.
It's really a wonderful thing to watch a work of art evolve from the very first ideas behind it, and see a true perfectionist and truly expressive artist work at it and have it grow from a small idea into a beautiful, beautiful space that has every element that any of us dreamed it could have. One of the really interesting things about Mira's career as it has grown and as she has developed fully into an artist, one of the interesting things is that she's working in a truly untraditional area for a woman, and especially for a woman of Japanese ancestry. I mean, she's fully developed in every way, and I think we'll all have to watch her from now on, because she has every aspect of her career down where it ought to be. She understands the design element. She understands the wood, which she cherishes, and that's part of her family tradition. But she also has to make things tick, make things work, and fit all the right pieces in. And we see, when we worked with her over this beautiful room, we watched how she was totally in command and with an innate understanding of what should be done and how the room should look. And she's so strong. She has this wonderful softness about her, but she's such a strong person. The inner fiber is tremendous.
Well, I think the room, to some extent, is the kind of spiritual center of the space. It is this this quiet and profound space where you can sit and absorb all of the content of what is about you. And I think that it represents for the museum an association with an important part of this region's artistic tradition, and also a part of the American artistic tradition. It gives the visitor an opportunity to experience, well, I guess the way I might sum it up is by using the quote that is above the room. When you enter this room, you're entering a way of life. And that sense of really experiencing what the spiritual quality of Nakashima is what that room represents. It's not a chair on a pedestal that I see from a distance. It's not a stage set. It is a space into which I take myself and I have the experience. And that, of course, is always the most profound thing that any art object can do. It can help you to have the actual experience. And that's what the room does. It's the spiritual center of the museum.
I think it really carries the spirit and the feeling that he would have liked in a room. It's very much like a Japanese tea room. We have one here on our property. There's a combination of simplicity and feeling that you can sit there and contemplate. And I think that this room has caught it very well. And there was always cooperation and good feeling and warmness, which we really enjoyed. And I think the room itself has so many of the features that George, if he designed it himself, would have done, I'm sure. This oriental touch, the Shoji, of course, at the wall, and all the little details which Mira has put into it.
When all is said and done, you know, it's great to have these plans, and it's great to work with the people, and we certainly also shouldn't leave out Celeste Callahan and her efforts on this project, nor the efforts of the Lovitts in terms of installing it, or the folks in the Nakashima studio who built some of the work. All of that's great and it's all wonderful, but none of it amounts to anything if the end product isn't a splendid success. And the ultimate success of this is to see the folks who go into that room and then sit down and have this experience. That, in retrospect, is, if you will, proof that all of the work and all of the effort and all of the scheming and collaboration, I mean, for those of us involved in the project, there is just the joy of having worked together. There's that camaraderie. There's that association that we'll always have. And you can have that association and camaraderie, and the end product can be of little value. But when you get, as we recently got, a wonderful letter from a woman in Florida who visited the museum and then wrote to Mira and expressed the great joy that she had as she sat in the room and watched the clouds pass overhead and talked about the spiritual experience she had. You get that, it is the final act of gee whiz. Not only did we all have a good time, and not only did we enjoy ourselves, but it seems as if we wound up with a product that visitors can share in the delight.
As an architect, I think she brought to this building and to this room a consistency of detail and scale, especially scale, into this room. Obviously tradition. She understood the traditions that were critical, but when I walked into the room and saw the mix of the different types of woods and the detail on the ceiling, which reflected a proportion that was in scale with the Shoji Screens, all of that subtlety takes a very talented architect, and she is that talented architect, in my opinion. I can say one thing: she certainly influenced me in a way that I would like to grow from in buildings that I do. I think what it brought to all of us working on the museum was a greater sense of enthusiasm and pride to have this additional element of design, and not just objects placed within a room, but a whole design concept within a room. So as far as I'm concerned, what it did for me personally and the office, I think I can speak for the office, is raise the level of enthusiasm for yet another element within this museum. And as far as I'm concerned, I think I've made a very good friend that I look forward to keeping, and someone whom I'd like to work with in the future, that being Mira Nakashima.
Well, it's so fitting for the Michener Museum in Doylestown to have space that is designed in the tradition of one of the most important artists in Bucks County. Certainly, just as the name Michener is known around the world and Bucks County is known around the world, certainly the name of Nakashima is known around the world for good reason. And so it was most desirous on the part of the board to have the physical representation of one of the really important artistic elements of our community, to be in the museum and to have a very special space. And it is a special and beautiful space that brings people in, not just in our community, but people who come from far away, to understand the true approach of this design element.
I worked here for 23 years. 20 of those years have been with my father. But since he passed on, I always feel that his presence is still here in the studio. And his presence is what guided me when I was doing that room. it was almost, maybe creativity is always this way, I don't know, but it was almost an unconscious laying of pencil to paper. I just, sort of drew it up. I didn't actually think, I want to have this kind of an impression and want to have this kind of a wall covering because it'll do this to people when they see it. It just kind of came. And we used wood, which Dad had collected. This one piece of wood in particular, which he said was so beautiful he did not want to sell it. And I felt that not only was it a tribute to him, but somehow it was a continuation of his work. And it was, maybe that's why I'm not so concerned about making my splash in the world, because I feel like I'm just a continuation of something that my father started, and that his presence is here in the wood and in the work that we do. It's not that he's really gone, that as long as we can keep making furniture, he's still alive to me. And maybe that's weird, but that's what keeps me going.
Appreciating all what God's eye alone once saw. The story of life's seasons is the ballad that it sings. Our lives are marked and bound together by concentric rings. The story of life's seasons is the ballad that it sings. Our lives are marked and bound together by concentric rings.